get started. All right. Well, thank you for joining us today. So my name is Amber Webb. I am the Family Consumer Sciences Extension Agent for Larimer County, and I specialize in food preservation classes, community nutrition classes, and a few other things. So all things family consumer science. And we are right in the middle of our harvest season. And so these food preservation classes are really great timing because pretty much everything is in season right now. Um, August is such a great month for it. So I hope that this class is so helpful to you. We do have a limited amount of time. So we are going to go over a lot of information very quickly, but I have sent to you in an email your fact sheets. And I did want to mention this to you. So you've got a fact sheet on canning tomatoes and tomato products. And you also have a fact sheet on canning fruits. And these, I would say, really are the two main kinds of products that you're going to be using for water bath canning. But there is so much available to you. And we'll talk through a little bit of those things. But some things you can do with water bath canning are pickles. I've got a beautiful jar of dill pickles here. You can do things like tomato sauce. You can do whole tomatoes. Those are, tomatoes are something you can use if you acidify them. And I'm going to talk about that, okay? One of our master food safety advisors canned some apple cider that we made this last year, which is so delicious. And then even things like jams and jellies, salsas, chutneys, things like that, okay? So hopefully this is enticing you a little bit. There's so much available to you. And last night, I did a hands-on class where we canned nectarines in boiling water, nothing else. Look how beautiful those are. It's like a beautiful rosy color. Okay. So I get this question a lot. Where did this all start? And I wanted to just give a very brief background about the history of home canning. It started quite a ways back. But in order to kind of speed this up, really I wanted to mention that during World War II, people were encouraged to plant victory gardens and can the fruits and vegetables that they grew. And that allowed the commercially processed fruits and vegetables to be used to feed the military. And so I'm sure you've heard of victory gardens. I'm sure you've seen some of these advertisements. And so this is kind of where the popularity of it really took off. Newspapers and magazines published how-to articles, and people were growing food in vacant lots and big city windows, even on community property. So community gardens really took a big jump during this time. And what I love to mention is that by the end of 1943, Victory Gardens supplied 40% of civilian needs for fruits and vegetables. And you might all have some stories about maybe your grandparents or your parents doing this work. And so just kind of give a little nod to that history. We've come a long way and people are so interested in this again. So I'm glad you're here to learn a little bit more. So there's a couple different kinds of canning methods out there. We're going to talk about water bath canning today, but I just wanted to, kind of give you a little bit more background as well on what those differences are. So water bath canning and pressure canning both create a vacuum. You're putting food in jars and you're heating it to a temperature that destroys microbes and inactivates enzymes. Enzymes are things that spoil food and deteriorate it, right? So the most common products that are canned are vegetables, followed by tomatoes and tomato products, and then fruit and fruit products. Now, the two different methods for canning are divided by pH, and that's really the most important part that we're really looking into. So a water bath canner can be used with acidic foods. So think of things like fruits, pickles, jams, jellies, and then tomatoes that are acidified. Now a pressure canner can also be used for foods that are not considered acidic. So that would be vegetables, meat, poultry, and fish, okay? So that's really that dividing line. So you can see that dividing line on the pH scale. So the pH scale measures how acidic or basic a substance is, and it ranges from 0 to 14. And the pH stands for potential hydrogen of a product. So that's getting really kind of sciencey, but you can see here there's a scale, and different types of fruits, different types of vegetables are all on a range in that scale, depending on what they are. If you are interested in getting more of the details of what is in what range, I can send you that information. Just let me know. We just don't really have time today to cover all of that. Now, what we also are considering within that splitting of acidic foods and non-acidic foods and canning all in general is that we are destroying yeast and molds and bacterias at that boiling temperature, okay? Now, if you've heard of botulism, most people have, they have heat-resistant spores. So they don't germinate in acidic foods, and so we don't have to really worry about botulism for water bath canning if you're doing high acidic foods. So what we do need to know is that in order to destroy those spores, we need a higher temperature, and that's at 240 degrees or above. And that's where pressure canning comes in, because pressure canning can get up to that higher temperature, okay? And so pressure canning must be used for low acid foods. So again, vegetables and meat products. Okay, and then the pressure increases temperature. So for 10 pounds of pressure or 10 pounds of pressure per square inch, it's 240 degrees at sea level, okay? Now, when we're canning, it's important to consider that we're destroying microorganisms, right? But we also just want to really consider the effects of foodborne illness. And so we can do this very safely. We can practice food safety. We can be really confident about the product that we're creating by doing really important steps like practicing good personal hygiene, washing your hands really well, getting underneath your fingernails, and then even using food safe gloves if you want to go, to that next step, you're welcome to do that. You want to clean and sanitize everything. Avoid cross-contamination of all the materials that are in your kitchen. You want to cook your foods adequately according to recipes and temperatures given. And then you want to keep your food at safe temperatures following those recipe instructions. So in order to do a canning project safely, there's several steps to consider, several other things to consider as well. And that is making sure that your recipes are coming from a review tested source. Okay, so you only want to select up-to-date recipes. You want to make sure that they're coming from a reliable source and that you're using your recipes exactly as the processing time calls for, okay? Now I've got a couple resources here that I will show you on the next slide. So these are really great resources to start with. Anything that is a good thing to consider when looking up a specific recipe. Say somebody gives you a bunch of cherries and you're not really sure where to start. You can Google a recipe, so say canned cherries, and then either before canned cherries or after canned cherries, type in state extension, and that will give you a pretty good list of anything nationwide that's coming from state extension, and you can trust that source. So you've got your CSU extension website, and that will give you these fact sheets that will give you that specific information. We also have an app called Preserve Smart. And if you don't know about that, that was developed by CSU and it's adjusted for altitude. I'll mention that in a few minutes. You can go into the app, you can click on fruit or vegetable, and then anything that's available for pressure canning, for water bath canning. And then you can go into that recipe. And Nancy, I can hear you coughing. Would you mind putting mute on your microphone for now?
Sorry, I thought I was.
That's okay. Thank you. So easy to preserve. This is another one. That's what this looks like right here. So easy to preserve comes out of the University of Georgia. And this is the National Center for Home Food Preservation, which is right above that. All of these recipes Our tested state extension offices nationwide are using this cookbook. It's used for state fair. It's a wonderful resource. If you can't get your hands on this, all of these recipes are available on their website as well. Okay, here is what the Ball Blue Book, a complete book of home preserving, looks like. There are several editions available. We are recommending that you do not use canning recipes prior to 1994 because a lot of things have changed since then, including the pH of foods and the soil that they're grown in. So make the little note of that somewhere. Don't use recipes before 1994. Here's a great recipe. There's a USDA complete guide to home canning that's available as a PDF. And then here's another one that I would love to mention. This one is called Food in Jars. And this is an acceptable resource. We even accept this for state fair and county fair entries. This is by Marissa McClellan. If anybody has a question about this one specifically, you can type it in. I can type this resource in the chat box. What I really like about this one is that it's small batch canning. So most of the recipes you're going to find are for fairly large recipes. You're going to get a lot of jars out of something. This is for recipes for 2 or 4 jars at a time. So if you find a really beautiful, you run into some raspberries, but you don't have a lot of them and you want to do something special, that's a really great place to start. So, okay. Now, and again, if you have any questions, put them in the chat box and Nancy will let me know if questions are coming in, or you can unmute if you'd like to. Okay, so canning takes a lot of time. It's a very involved process, but the payoff is great, right? You have beautiful product all winter long to eat, but you really need to make sure that you've got uninterrupted time, that you're waiting for your water to boil, you're waiting for the process to cool down. It can be a several-hour process. In our water bath canning class last night, one of our canners is much larger than the other, and it took a lot longer for that one to heat up. So quite a bit longer. So really know what you're yourself getting into. Give yourself an entire afternoon or entire evening and have help. That is definitely recommended. Don't do it on your own. Okay, so it's also recommended that you're using the best product that you can get your hands on because that will give you the best product in the end. So make sure that you are canning your fruits and vegetables at the peak of quality as soon after harvest as possible. You want to make sure that you're rinsing your fruits and vegetables, but you're not soaking them. But I also do want to mention that for things like fruit, like this, if you're just canning fruit, there is a pre-treatment soak that is recommended using something like a fruit fresh. I've got a whole bag of goodies down here, a fruit fresh solution that will prevent things from darkening. And we'll see this again later in the presentation. If you're doing hunting or you're purchasing a half of an animal or something like that, a quarter of an animal, you want to make sure that they're from healthy animals and that they are preserved as soon after you get them as possible. Now, your equipment that you're going to need to use for water bath canning really is all right here, most of it. Other things that I would recommend using is a kitchen towel. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit later on, but you'll need a kitchen towel to put your hot jars on. And then you want to make sure that your surface that you're going to be canning on is safe for canning. Not all glass top surfaces are created equal, and I'll mention that a little bit later on too. Okay, so what you see here is a large water bath canner. You can see one behind me as well. That's great to use. There are also stainless steel canner baths with lid tops, a glass lid that enables you to see inside, which is really nice to use. If you don't have a special water bath canning pot, you can also use a large pot that has a fitted lid and some kind of a base that will separate the bottom of the canner bath from the bottom of the jars. And I'll show you what I mean here. So we've got, For some canning water bath canners, you've got a rack here, and you can see it's not really that much space between, this jar and the bottom of the water bath. It doesn't have to be a whole lot. So some will come with things like that. If you don't have that available to you, you can tie rings together or bands together and make that a surface that you can put your jars on. There are things here. You can see it's a little rubber, kind of rubber trivet that you can use. It's not very thick. If you have a metal trivet you want to use, you can use that. I've even seen in a bind, you can coil up some aluminum foil and make a little snake out of it and even put that in there. So there's a lot of options for you, okay? And you just want to make sure that your water bath canner is as deep enough, or whatever pot you use, to cover those jars with water by at least an inch or two, okay?
Amber, there's a question from
Sure.
Lacey.
Uh-huh.
And she says, hello, this may be answered later on in the class, so sorry if I'm jumping ahead. I have the Ball canning book, which has a recipe for tomato sauce that requires 20 pounds of plum tomatoes. I have plum tomatoes, but not 20 pounds. Can I use the other varieties that I have in my garden, or will this change the pH too much?
That is a great question, and I would love your input on that. My first inclination is to say it's important that you use the variety of the tomato that's in that recipe, and there are other recipes for different kinds of tomatoes, which might be what you have. What's your input, Nancy?
I would agree with you. It's very easy to reduce one of these very large scale uh, um, recipes that ends up with 8 quarts of something or
Mm-hmm.
12 pints or what have you. You can always cut that in half, cut all the ingredients in half, and then just make a smaller quantity of jars. I agree that particularly with tomatoes, recipes are formulated because the plum tomatoes are thicker when they're cooked than the globe tomatoes. And I would just stick with what I have and then reduce the recipe. And I have done this a lot of times for cucumbers, for canned peaches, for any kind of produce. It's just my husband and myself. And, I don't need 16 quarts of something. I just need 2.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. That's a great question. Okay, so a little bit more about the different kinds of cooktops that you can use. We really just recommend making sure that you check with your manufacturer that they recommend canning on it because some glass is thinner than others. Burners are different. Some things are like the wire coils, or you have induction cooktops. So I have a couple slides here to talk through them, but I really think the main thing is to check with your manufacturer and make sure that you have a coil heating unit that is large enough to handle the diameter of that water bath canner or whatever size pot that you're going to use. You don't want to use one of the small burners on a giant water pot or water bath canner because it's just not going to be able to heat it up as much, okay? And then on like induction cooktops, also make sure that you're checking that owner's manual for any concerns for canning as well, okay? Now, you can also use an electric water bath canner. These are so handy to have because you don't have to be limited to just using your oven. You can use these anywhere that fits on your countertop. So this is what I was mentioning to you briefly. We had a water bath canner just like the ceramic one last night that we were using on a burner. And then we also had this electric water bath canner going. And this one took quite a lot longer to get to temperature. But what's really nice is that you have on that dial, you see on the photo, there is a dial specifically that shows you the different temperatures that you can precisely set it to, which is not something that we have control over as accurately with a stovetop. So there's a couple different brands you can see here that are available that are currently on the market. And then there are also electric water bath canners out there that you can use instead of using on your stovetop as well. I've not used one of these specifically, and I would love to get my hands on one. But if you are interested, they are out there, and you can program for specific recipes for specific altitude. They are a little pricey, and they only are suitable for recipes developed specifically for that appliance. We've gotten questions about this, and I know of people that have canned on an open propane situation like this. It's possible. It is just not a great idea because you don't have as much control over the heat, and you don't know what the heat is at. And so it can be a little bit tricky. So we just, out of university research, we just don't recommend it. Now, it's really important that you're using mason type home canning jars. I have had people mention that they are working with grandparents or family to start canning, and they told them to start collecting jars from pickles and that kinds of thing. But those types of jars are not, that glass is just not tempered to be reheated at the temperatures that we're cooking at, that boiling temperature, and to be reused. Um, they don't have like a narrower sealing surface on them. You're going to have more breakage, more seal failures. While it looks like it may work, it's just not a solid product for you. So we do recommend using those brand name jars and make sure that there's no defects on those jars. If there's any kinds of chips on the rim or defects in the glass, it's just not a great idea. You also want to make sure that you're washing the jars with hot soapy water and then rinsing well so there's no residue of that soap, or running it through the dishwasher. That can be really helpful for you as well. We don't need to sterilize jars at our altitude because we have to increase our water bath canning times. So if you've seen that in the past, sterilizing jars, you don't have to do that anymore. And then only again, be using those resources that are very reliable sources. Now, it's important that you're using two-piece lids. So you see here is a perfect photo of that, and I've got this right in front of you as well. So when the jars are processed, the lid gasket softens and it flows slightly to cover the jar sealing surface. But so that you can see that lid will come off a little bit. But we want that to happen because we want a little bit of the air to escape from the jar. When that air has escaped sufficiently, the gasket then forms an airtight seal as the jar cools. And then that's when you hear, when you take it out, that popping sound, knowing that the seal has occurred and that it's concave. And so it's important that technology is used in the way that we've explained, okay? And then you follow manufacturer's directions. I am going to mention here that you previously need to wash with hot soapy water and then put them in a little saucepan of water to boil or to at least warm. And that's because of the material around the bottom of that lid. That has since changed. So they've changed the technology and you no longer need to do that. You only need to wash with soapy water and rinse off those lids before you start. They don't need to be heated anymore. And that I would just remind you to, with that, just make sure that the box that you have of these lids says so, because the older ones will probably still require you to sterilize. I'm not sure when that changed, but I do want to recommend that you're not using these lids that are older than 5 years old, because that technology really has changed, okay? And it's better than it used to be. And you don't have to do as many steps. Okay, I'm going to take a quick drink of water. And now we are going to talk about the specifics of how to can. Okay, so something I want to mention is the difference between hot pack versus raw pack. I'm going to talk you through these and then show you some, well, talk you through kind of the example of what happens. So let's say you are going to can some peaches. If you look at your fact sheet here, you've got instructions for how to do that, how to prepare the fruit, how to prepare your tools, and then if you want to make a sugar syrup, you can do from a light syrup all the way to a heavy syrup, but also you don't have to do a syrup. You can actually just pour boiling water over the top of the fruit. You don't need a syrup at all. You don't have to add sugar. And then you fill your jars and then you process. And you'll see here, there's a table of all different kinds of fruit that you can prepare in a water bath canner and how to do that. Some recipes will give you, flavoring seasonings to add to it, but you can also just do it plain, right? So here on this slide, we've got hot pack. So what you would do is cut up your fruit and then you would let it simmer for 3 to 5 minutes. And then you would pack the fruit hot into the jar. Now, why would you do that? As you cook food, it softens up a little bit and shrinks a little, right? So you can actually get more food in the jar once you pack it if you hot pack it. And that again is cooking it previously. And you are going to have less oxygen in the jar. You're going to have better color, better nutrient retention, and less likely to float, okay? Now, a cold pack or a raw pack is when you just cut up your fruit and then you pack it into the jar raw. You don't do anything else besides cutting it and then preparing it like we talked about in a solution of a ascorbic acid solution or like a lemon water solution to prevent darkening. You just pack those in tight, okay? What's interesting is that when you pack those in tightly, you're going to have less fruit in the jar overall, and the fruit may float. This is like a tongue tire. What's so interesting though, these jars were raw packed. And so sometimes you'll have almost an inch of water below of that fruit floating and that fruit shrinking. And I think this is probably one of the best examples of a raw pack that doesn't have that floating. So Nancy might be able to answer this, but I don't know if it maybe is you're going to see that floating more with different kinds of fruits over one kind of fruit over another. But that is kind of one of the considerations to make. These are beautiful, but maybe you wouldn't want to raw pack a gift or raw pack something that you would enter to the county fair. You want a full jar, right? And you may get some discoloration in a raw pack, but so far these are looking good. Okay.
Amber,
Yeah,
we have a couple of more questions in the
sure.
chat.
Okay.
From Camille. I recently received a box of care jars from a friend. They are the jars sold with Classico spaghetti sauce. Can these be reused for my purposes, provided they are in good shape?
So I would not recommend it, unfortunately. It's those jars, I know exactly which ones you're talking about. I think I may even have one at home. I know that band, the top of the jar, looks exactly like a mason jar. But again, they're not tempered to be reused in the way that you would reuse them for canning. And you're going to get a different quality of seal. I talked through those slides a little bit before, a couple different things. I just wouldn't recommend it. You could definitely use it for other things, for storing, food in your pantry, foods, grains, that kind of thing. But I wouldn't recommend it for canning.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And from Dana, If a jar does not seal after 24 hours, is the food product in the jar still good to reprocess, even though it has sat unrefrigerated for that amount of time?
That is an excellent question, and we actually have a slide that will go over that specifically. So I'm going to hold off on that, and that will
That's
get
it.
answered for you.
That's it for now. As for the raw pack versus the hot pack,
Mm-hmm.
I don't can much fruit.
Okay.
I tend to freeze it, but for vegetables, I prefer a hot pack simply because I get more product in the jar.
Okay.
And then that is pressure canned, but
Mm-hmm.
it's a personal preference.
Okay.
And I've done it both ways with satisfactory results.
Okay. That's good to know. And this week I have seen at multiple grocery stores peaches and nectarines for 99 cents a pound. So this week specifically is like the perfect time to do some of this water bath canning if you're interested in trying it out. Okay, so we're just
Amber,
gonna, yeah,
kind of responding to your response to Camille,
yeah.
um, are care jars not the best to use? And I think she says that she received a box of care jars that were sold with the Classico spaghetti sauce. I'm not sure if they say care on the box like it does on the jars that you have there in your office.
Yeah.
Camille, can you clarify that? It says the jars say care. If they're designed for commercial spaghetti sauce, they are not designed for home canning.
Mm-hmm.
You can buy care jars in home canning supply areas in your grocery stores, hardware stores, and the like. But it needs to say home canning on the box.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Nancy, for that. So this one here, I don't know if you can see it. This is care as well. Self-sealing, yeah. And that's the difference. Is it created for commercial use or is it created for home use? Great question, Camille. Thank you. Okay, so we are running, we have a lot to cover. So if we run out of time, if we get to that 45, we probably will run a little bit over. You're welcome to stay, but if you need to go, I completely understand. Thank you for joining us. And if you want to contact me about any further information, or if you'd like a copy of these slides, I can send you a copy of these slides as well. But again, I'm just going to be talking through the steps, and you have step-by-step information in these handouts, okay? So you have picked a product that you're going to can. How do you go through it? So you're going to fill your canner halfway with hot water, and then based on raw pack or hot pack foods, you're going to heat either to 140 or 180 degrees, okay? And then you are going to heat your jars in hot water. You don't want to boil them yet to keep them warm and prevent them from breaking when the hot food is added. Now, I mentioned that you can do this in a dishwasher as well. So just empty your dishwasher, make sure it's nice and clean, and then do a cycle to keep those jars, to wash them, and then also just keep it closed until you're ready to use it. They'll keep them nice and warm. And I've talked through this part here. So if you've got your jars in the water bath canner, or if they're in your dishwasher, you need to remove them from the hot water, make sure there's no water in them. So you're going to empty that jar. You can see the photo here, and then put that jar on the countertop. Now you can see here that these jars are laid out on a kitchen towel. I highly recommend doing that. You just don't want your hot jar going onto your cold kitchen counter, okay? And then you're going to fill your jars one at a time, leaving appropriate headspace that's recommended in that recipe. And I have a photo a little bit later on about headspace, but just want to make sure that you're filling your jars. And you're going to fill all of those jars on all at the same time and put them on the countertop before you put them back in. And I will talk through that as well. You're going to prepare your recipe using your tested recipe using the best quality ingredients that you have. And then here's the Headspace photo. It will tell you on a recipe how much Headspace you will need. So for example, our nectarines, I think I keep saying peaches, our nectarines from last night are filled to a 1/2 inch of Headspace in the jar. And then we put boiling water also to 1/2 inch, and that's in the recipe. Okay. Now, that headspace is going to change depending on the food, the density of the product, the pack style, and the processing time. So it's important, again, that you just follow that recipe precisely. Now, once you have that product in the jar, you're going to want to use some kind of a wand to remove air bubbles. You don't want air bubbles trapped in that jar, and that will help the processing a little bit better. And then you are going to wipe your rim and the thread of it using a damp paper towel or a cloth to remove any food residue. And then you're going to take your lid, you're going to put it on that nice clean rim that you just made, okay? And then you are going to apply the band and adjust it until it's fingertip tight. And the way that I teach this to people, what fingertip tight looks like is you put your band on and then you twist it a couple times and it naturally stops, right? I'm not cranking it. I maybe am gonna do like another 1/2 inch or so. You can see I'm not cranking it with my wrist. It stops there, crank it just a tiny, move it just a tiny bit farther. And often if it's on a flat surface and I do this, the jar itself is moving. You can see that. I'm not tightening it anymore. It's at a really great a tightness. And the reason is that if the rings are too loose, liquid may escape from those jars, too much liquid, and then the seals may fail. If the rings are too tight, the air can't vent during that process, and the food will discolor during storage. If it's too tight, the lids can also buckle, the jars can break, and so it can really cause problems. So you want to make sure that there's a way for those air bubbles to escape, and that's really fingertip tight. Okay. So practice that a few times before you put things in the canner and really feel confident about it. So you filled up all your jars, you wiped up all your rims, you freed the air bubbles, you put the bands on fingertip tight. And next thing is to take, your 8 jars or whatever you have, and then one by one, put them in a canner. Don't tilt them because you have just made a nice, lovely seal or, a nice, lovely surface that you don't want any of the product to tip out onto, okay? And then you're going to put them in one by one and make sure that you have an inch or 2 of water above the line of the jar. And then you bring your warm water up to a boil, okay? And then when you come to a full rolling boil, that's when you set your timer, okay? Now, what's interesting is if you live in Colorado, we may have people beyond Colorado joining us today. You do need to adjust for altitude. And that is going to mean adding processing time, okay? So anywhere you are in Colorado is considered above altitude because anywhere you are is above 3,000 feet. So for example, in Colorado State University publications, specifically because we're at high altitude, you are going to have directly on the recipe right here a range, I don't know if you can see this, a range of altitudes. So it says here, processing time for 0 to 1,000 feet, 1,000 to 3,000 feet, 3,000 to 6,000 feet, and then 6,000 to 9,000 feet. Those temperatures or those times change as you go up in elevation, and also with the size of jar. Pints or quarts also change, and the type of pack and recipe that you're using. It's all here for you. Oftentimes in a book, even Ball Blue Book, here I'll just open up a recipe. It looks like a standard recipe that you would see in a cookbook, right? There's no altitude adjustments on these recipes. The altitude adjustment is either in the very back or the very front of the book. So if it's not given to you, you do need to make sure that you make those adjustments, okay? So you've been waiting for your product. You set a timer for 35 minutes. What you need to do is turn off your heat, take off the lid, wait for 5 minutes, and then you can remove your jars from the canner with using your tongs without tilting. We don't want you to tilt that and compromise that seal. It's very tempting to do that. But what you can do if you're really, you just can't help yourself, you have to get that water off. You could just dab it lightly with a paper towel if you want to soak up that water. Okay. And then put it on a kitchen towel. You don't want to put it on a cold counter surface. And then you want to leave your jars undisturbed for 12 to 24 hours. When you take it out of the canner, because it's been, bubbling around, some of those screw bands are going to be a little bit loose. Don't worry about it. Don't retighten it. What you're really looking for is that seal. You should have a concave seal. You can see that it's down. If you touch the top of it and it's not popping back up, you know you've got a good seal, okay? And then when you're ready to store, you need to store them without the screw bands. The screw bands can cause, if you've got any kind of residue on here, they can hide the fact that you maybe have mold, if you've had, not a clean jar or rust or anything like that. So it's important that you take those off and then you wash your jars so that they're clean. You want to label with contents, with the dates and so you know what you made. And then you want to store it in a cool, dark, dry place and use within a year. Now, here's the question that we had earlier. If you've processed your jars and they've been sitting on your countertop for less than 24 hours, you can reprocess them. You do need to use a new lid and you do need to use full processing time again. If you are going beyond 24 hours, it's not safe because it has been sitting at room temperature. And so if it's beyond that 24 hours, don't use it. If it's up to that 24 hours and you don't want to reprocess, you can refrigerate it and eat it within a few weeks, or you can even freeze the product, okay? Now we are at time. I have 5 more slides. I just wanted to mention, do we have any questions before folks have to hop off?
None have come up since the last questions we asked.
Okay, wonderful. And Nancy, could you also please get a count for me we can mark down how many folks joined us today?
Sure.
Thank you. Okay, so just a few more slides if you are able to hang on. I'd be happy to finish them for you. So we kind of glossed over the history of home canning, but along with home canning, there have been a progression of the knowledge of the safety of home canning. And as such, different methods of canning have evolved over time, okay? And what might have been considered allowable or even not even allowable, but considered safe by home economists using what they had at the time, things have changed. So one of those methods is called open kettle canning, and that is cooking a product. It is putting it in a jar, and the product being so hot, sometimes you will hear a little bit of a pop and you think it's sealed. And so you turn it upside down to try to make a seal without actually water bath canning it. You may have seen that from family in the past. It was definitely something that people did. So it's not safe because you don't really know if you're destroying all those microorganisms that cause spoilage and foodborne illness. You just don't know. And often with those, you can't taste, you can't smell, you don't see any changes, and that's how you can get sick. Okay. People also have asked about oven processing, microwave processing, and dishwasher processing, thinking that the temperatures will get hot enough. That is definitely not the case, and that you are running some risk of those microorganisms overgrowing. Okay. And then electric pressure cookers. So this is something like an Instant Pot. These are not canners. Some do come with instructions for canning, but we do not consider it safe. It doesn't have the right size and the right capacity of a pressure canner. But there are these days electric pressure canners, not electric pressure cookers, that are designed specifically for canning. I don't have a photo of one, but they are definitely out there, and I've heard good things. I've not used one, but I would love to. So I would consider those safe to use, an electric pressure canner. And then in the past, people have used paraffin or wax seals. They would fill a jar with product and then put that wax over the top of it to try to prevent air from coming in or out. That is just not a safe method. You can get mold in it to contaminate the product. You can just get really sick from that. And then there are Tatler lids. I've got a box here. This is what the brand looks like. These are considered reusable plastic. They're BPA free, but these have not been tested by the National Center for Home Food Preservation. So you can see here, you've got one band and a plastic lid. Because they've not been lab tested by our state extension folks, we just can't recommend it. But I know that the product is out there. And then once you're done with your canning project, I'm looking to see what else I have here. If you've got any signs of spoilage, it very well could be that it was processed incorrectly. Or if you've got cloudy canning liquid, that might be a sign of spoilage. Maybe if there's odor or mold growth, the jars may not have been sealed. You can call State Extension and you can ask maybe for some advice. We'll ask you these questions. Did you use a tested recipe? Did you follow the recipe explicitly? Did you adjust for altitude? Are your jars sealed? And that can really help you determine whether or not it's safe to eat and really kind of help you think through that process. So we have covered so much information in these last 50 minutes or so, and I just want to thank you so much for joining us today. If you have any other questions, maybe we have another minute or two. Other than that, I do have, if you don't mind, a survey that will take you probably 3 minutes to fill out. And I'm going to paste this in the chat box for you. This will give us some feedback that we'd love to hear, how the class is online, any kind of feedback you have. We would love to take it. And I see, if you just follow that link, that will take you right to the survey. I think it's about 5 questions. And I have iPad 3 saying I would love a copy of the slides. I emailed everybody today the fact sheets. So you have my email. If you would reply back to my email and let me know that you want the slides, because I don't know what your email is from the chat box right off. So thank you, everybody. I do appreciate you joining today. Hopefully this was helpful to you and has given you a little bit more confidence to water bath can. Nancy, do you have any other comments before we say goodbye?
Well, I just wanted to remind everyone that while it's wonderful that Amber can offer these online sessions, we do offer, excuse me, hands-on sessions at the extension office. That's what Amber was referring to, that yesterday in the evening, they processed apricots. There's a real difference between sitting there with a jar in front of you and some peeled apricots than watching a presentation like this. Much of the same information is conveyed. And of course, it's too late for the water bath canning.
But we do have a pickling class and a jams and jellies class, and those are also water bath canning methods. So we will talk through water bath canning again, and you'll get to practice those. So there's still 2 more opportunities for water bath, specifically with pickles and with jams and jellies.
Thank you, Amber. I was getting choked up.
Yeah. Well, thank you everybody for joining today. I really do appreciate it. And please reach out if you have any questions along the way. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.